Borys Potapenko, I spent 25 years working for Ukraine during Soviet years, and now I've spent 25 years working in the context of an independent or de jure independent Ukraine. I just got back from being in Donetsk for 3 weeks, and how quickly we forget that in the spring of 2014, hundreds of people were kidnapped, were beaten, tortured, had their noses cut off, ears cut off, arms ripped out, murdered. Do you remember in Slovyansk there was a Protestant parish where the priest's 2 adult sons, each with 8 children, both of them were kidnapped by the separatists and tortured to death because they wouldn't renounce their faith. 2 of the deacons of the same church, the same thing happened to them. This type of barbarity is not forgotten by the local people, but it seems to have kind of lost its place in the contemporary memory of what the people are fighting against. So history, memory, the progress of events, the internet on the one hand is a great tool. On the other hand, it accelerates the process of information and events to make yesterday history, not yesterday. And it creates this disconnect within our own life. The processes by which civil society can function today are so immediate, so advanced, so easy, and so inexpensive that any group like yourself can mobilize and actually foment change. Our Ukrainian community has become so dormant that any type of proactive work becomes almost star power because there is very little competing with it for attention. Multilateral organizations have integrated Ukraine into their fabric, whether it's the World Trade Organization, whether it's the International Court of Justice, whether it's the United Nations or its various agencies, even though Ukraine had been in the UN since its founding formally, have integrated them into their bureaucratic and political systems. Accepting Ukraine as an international subject has been a much more difficult task. And on one hand, it's human nature. A country that did not exist on the map of the world appears, and that is going to disrupt the relationships between countries over that, concerning that territory. Now, all of a sudden, that territory is a nation, a sovereign state, and has its own voice. And you got to fit that piece of the puzzle into the puzzle for which there is no space. It had been spoken for by others, and those others haven't given up trying to continue to speak for it. So, we do need to give the devil his due in the context of Ukraine being able to wedge out its place in Europe where there had been no place for it for over 350 years. That's one aspect. Mm-hmm. The other aspect is whether Ukraine can sustain its independence into perpetuity. So, if I was Germany or France or Italy or England or the other countries, I wouldn't be putting all of my eggs into the Ukrainian basket either, even though an independent Ukraine would serve my strategic interests as a freedom-loving, independent, democratic nation. All of these are loaded terms. Independent, sovereign, democratic, security, everything has its limitations and interpretations. And in the European context, one of the most loaded concepts is European values. When you stop and you pick them apart and you look at who are the espousers of those values, Germany, for example, and if there hadn't been denazification, and if there hadn't been a Marshall Plan, a total rebuilding of the destroyed enemy, and reinculcation of a new culture and civic identity, who knows what we would have in Europe. In other words, World War I defeated Germany, left it defeated. World War II defeated Germany and restored it. So when you look at Ukraine in this context, you say, is it trying to mimic what is Europe, or is it trying to develop its own identity within a European context? And I would argue for the latter. In the diaspora, we had a raging debate for 25 years, chicken or the egg. Is it the economy or is it national identity? Or does national identity derive from the economy? Will good business practices spawn civil society? Do you need a national identity to have a civil society? Is defeating the legacy of Soviet totalitarianism something that has to be done overtly? Or is it something that will itself dissipate and go away as you introduce democratic norms and modalities of functioning for civil societies and so forth? And these 25 years have taught me one thing, is that none of this happens in an evolutionary way. Everything that is going to take is done proactively by very conscious actors. I think that this is the most advanced, the most safe time for Ukraine in 25 years. The Ukrainian people have risen up. They're not going to be put down. The Ukrainian people are consciously fighting for something that they hold dear and that they recognize in extreme, profound way. For 24 years, Ukraine had been hanging on the cusp. Are we or are we not? Maidan and the war with Russia has decided that question. It had never been decided before. We did the symbols, we did the anthems, we did the anniversaries, but the Ukrainian people never really decided on what side of the fence they are. Now they have, and I can say that with authority, because I'm not talking about Lviv, I'm talking about Luhansk and Donetsk, where the people, if anybody asks, don't want to go to Russia and are fighting and dying. Remember one thing, more boys from volunteer divisions that are formed of boys from Donetsk and Luhansk have died than from any other region of Ukraine. The largest amount is Donetsk number 1, Lviv number 2. So the illusion that Eastern Ukraine is pro-Russian, yes, a lot in Eastern Ukraine are pro-Russian, but a lot more are not. And so this factor, the back has been broken. The people mobilized to help the troops, then they mobilized to help the refugees, recognizing the power that they have by doing those two volunteer actions, has burst forth in them a civic activism that they never knew existed within them.